Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. This is the Combine edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. So, as you may or may not know, the great Underwear Olympics of 2025 are unfolding in Indianapolis this weekend. Let's see, we've got defensive linemen and linebackers going to the mat today. We're also going to obviously have the skill position guys go later this weekend, I believe, on Saturday. So it's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of hemming, some hawing, things of that nature. But it's an exciting time. We finally get some verified measurables on these guys that we've been plugging into our various mock drafts and mock drafts machines for the last few weeks here as we get ready for the NFL draft. But Mario, from a fantasy perspective, what is the biggest storyline that you want to see get settled this weekend at the Combine?
I guess what I'd like to see and what I'm going to maybe see are two different things. I would have liked, for instance, Ashton Genty to participate in the Combine, and really anybody who's not participated in the Combine, the athletic testing anyway. I don't really gauntlet drill aside, I'm not sure I care about any drills at the Combine, but I am interested in the athletic testing. So with this, I guess with this running back class being as seemingly good and deep as it is, I'd like just some general clarity to emerge there. It doesn't really matter to me even who's logging the numbers or to what effect. I guess I'd like my guys to do well or whatever, but just any added clarity, even if it's like so this is made up. If Caleb Johnson runs a 4.41, then it's like, okay, good. That's like a clear enough data point that it tells us something tangible and isn't just like to the more generic, not necessarily significant effect of like, oh, this is a pretty good number. It's not that bad in this class. If it's a Jeremy Langford class 40 time wise, then it doesn't really matter if you run like the third best time. But if this class comes through with like the kind of strength that we expect at running back, then you would, I think, expect the class to just in general test well as a group.
I think you would as well. And, to your point on the toolsiness of this class, and we'll get to more of these type of over-unders later, but like what I'm seeing an over-under of 4.39 for Dylan Sampson's 40. So if he's, RB7 or RB8, and we're seeing that type of 40, I mean, obviously he probably wouldn't be RB7 or 8 if he does run the sub 4.4, but point being, like, this class on paper, we think it is looking pretty deep. And I do tend to agree that this is the big fantasy storyline. I think it's been well picked over that this class is at least expected to be the best that we've had in recent years, both as far as top end talent and as depth is concerned. Love to see, some clarity, whether, among the second tier, especially with Genty not participating, who's RB2? Is it Omarion Hampton? Is it Trevion Henderson? Is it somebody else like a Quinshon Judkins? There's any number of possibilities there. I think dovetailing off of that, and Caleb Johnson, another interesting guy in that respect. As far as the receivers go, I think that seems kind of unsettled as far as the consensus goes right now. I think coming into the offseason, it was Ted McMillan and Luther Burden, and that was largely the same as what we came in to this last college football season with those two as kind of like your Cadillacs, your 1A, 1B types at receiver. But it feels like neither of them have that stronghold necessarily on wide receiver one, at least as far as the consensus is concerned. And guys like Emeka Ibuka out of Ohio State and Matthew Golden, even out of Texas, have kind of been added to the discourse. I don't know if it's a thing where, and we've talked about this in years past, where we get a little bit bored. We get a little bit of prospect fatigue with some of these higher end guys that we've heard about for forever. Like we've heard about Ted McMillan in this type of, discussion point for a year and a half at this point, 2 years almost. So people have known about him. People have known about Luther Burden since, basically since he committed to Missouri. Kind of a surprise to recruit Knicks out there. So is it a matter of people getting bored of those two, or is it reasonable and justified for people in our space here to be a little bit open to the idea of someone other than Luther Burden or Tet McMillan being the first receiver off the board?
I'm definitely still out on McMillan as the wide receiver 1, but for me, there's still a lot at stake with the combine. So cop out answer in the meantime, but I don't really have a final opinion on a guy like Burden because I'm just agnostic while pending the workout numbers. If Burden tests at the combine or wherever, I guess, like Deebo Samuel did, which is to say like a really uncommonly high density, a really uncommonly high 40 speed, low 40 time for that build, then it's sort of like, okay, even if Luther Burden has a sort of limited skill set to mostly being underneath, mostly being a yards after the catch, manufactured yards after the catch guy, at least if he has if he has like really good speed at the kind of weight where you can credibly project him to run with some power too, then you don't have to wonder so much, well, how is he going to create yardage after the catch at the NFL level? But if he's just kind of a mid athlete, then maybe he more so trends toward like a LaVisca Chenault kind of projection or something like that. And that's why, to me, it's like I can tell you I would think poorly of Burden or well of Burden if he tested certain ways, but until those times, I'm not really locked into a take. I do have him ranked something more like wide receiver 4 or 5 than at the top. Again, I have McMillan at the top. I don't think he's like one of the best wide receiver 1s we've had anytime recently or anything like that. But I do think he's this, pending the testing, the athletic testing anyway, McMillan is still the wide receiver 1 in this class. And I think if you're taking a wide receiver, if you're going to take the first wide receiver in this draft, it should probably be him. Even if he doesn't have a complete all-around game, and specifically with McMillan, I guess the concern might be his catch rate and his ability to kind of make contested catches. As much as McMillan made a lot of big plays in college, and as much as he really runs well by any standard for a player of his build, we don't yet know exactly how fast or big he is. So knowing that kind of stuff will help put certain potential doubts to rest. But in the meantime, I'm still like optimistic for McMillan because it's just generally really difficult to produce the way he did and make the kind of plays, more specifically, that he did at Arizona, unless you're one of the best athletes on the field. Maybe it's not the fastest 40 specifically, but at the very least, it's likely that he has some of, build and reach and whatever else, acrobatics and like speed. And maybe you can't test for all of those things in one accurate measure. And maybe you have to kind of like squint a little and guess at a few points. But again, like to produce like he did. And by the way, McMillan produced really crazy last year too, with Jacob Cowing and Tanner McLaughlin there. And McLaughlin was like a 25-year-old tight end playing in college. Jacob Cowing, I think, was a totally good 4th-round pick last year. So for McMillan to outplay those guys as a true sophomore, again, it's one of those things like you can only be so unathletic and still produce like that.
It's true. And, for anyone who's into the breakout age type of stuff, he was really good from his first year. I felt like at Arizona. So, there's a lot to like about McMillan, and I'll be surprised if he's not wide receiver 1 coming out of this weekend. But before we get into some of these other wideouts, I do have a quick message from one of our sponsors, a message from our friends over at Edge Boost. Have you ever had your debit card declined or had to call your bank at 3 a.m. in Vegas? Well, Edge Boost is the first consumer-facing online bank dedicated to the gaming industry. There are numerous benefits to using Edge Boost. to $250K per day in debit deposits and unlimited withdrawals, cashback on sports betting, DFS, and sweeps. Deposit $25, you get $25. 100% approval for all gaming activity, financial segmentation for discretion, and responsible gaming. Compatible today for prediction markets, iCasino, DFS, sports betting, lottery, brick and mortar casinos, horse racing, and sweeps. No transaction reviews or account freezes. Visit edgeboost.bet today and use promo code ROTOPOD. That's promo code ROTOPOD. Also got a message from our friends over at Blue Wire. So, Mario, you did mention kind of loosely during your breakdown of Luther Burden that maybe right now, in your mind, you might enter the combine as as wide receiver 4, which may surprise some people. So, if we got Ted McMillan posted up at number 1, Burden 4, 5, who fills that gap between the two?
I have Jaden Higgins from Iowa State and Trey Harris from Mississippi, formerly Louisiana Tech. I don't really have there's still a degree of like agnosticism with these two also, so I don't have like a set opinion. It's just kind of the best case scenarios for these two guys, I think, could be pretty uniquely good. They're a little bit different though. Trey Harris more of like a big play, downfield pressing kind of receiver, and I don't know, he's not going to be like 6'3", he's going to be 6'2" something, and I don't know what would be a fair expectation for Trey Harris's 40 time or whatever else, but it's a little bit of the McMillan thing, like to produce like this at a school, Mississippi, where there's been plenty of recent, NFL prospect or pseudo, fringe prospect receivers who are really athletic. Trey Harris still had all of them like magnitudes behind him in terms of like the quality of production. So between that and the fact that Trey Harris was also very productive at Louisiana Tech before he transferred, for me, it's just one of those things. Like if he tests well athletically at the combine or pro day or whatever, Trey Harris would be tough for me to fade at that point. Like his per snap target rate's really high. His per target returns are just crazy high. And we can't just say it's like the Mississippi system, because he also did it at Louisiana Tech to a level that was clearly stand out for his experience and the level of competition. But in the case of Higgins, it's a little bit different. He's not going to test as well as most of the receivers. Higgins, in fact, might run something more like a 4.6 kind of 40. But I think when you watch Higgins, and this kind of corroborates like the production that he had at Iowa State, where he primarily almost entirely ran from the boundary, did a lot of work downfield, but always from the boundary. And from the boundary, especially for how big he is at 6'4", pushing 220, Higgins has a really unusual amount of suddenness and kind of like short area change of direction, burst, general coordination, stuff like that. So I think that this makes him kind of similar to Drake London in all of this, but Higgins doesn't have the speed to just beat someone off the line, in a your average situation or whatever, and then torch them downfield. But he can land so many jabs on the defense that they sort of have to eventually, after giving up like 4 catches for 50 yards in the first half or whatever, you start to, as a corner, want to jump one of these routes, especially when you think you've already seen it and that you've identified like, oh, I've seen this play, I remember this. And if in that situation Higgins gets that look, I think he can definitely hit the double move, or just sort of, if the defense is playing really aggressive press coverage, I think he can kind of just get behind the guy that way. And so it would make him again like Drake London or like Keenan Allen or something like that. And I realize this sounds like really, maybe it is excessive praise for Higgins, but I just think that the numbers on the tape make it look this way. He's for a 6'4", 220-ish receiver, he clearly has an unusual ability to just sort of present a quick target from the boundary.
Yeah, no, it's definitely rare for someone of that build, of that stature. Is there any like Xavier Hutchinson to his game in your mind, or is this different story completely?
So it's a little tough for me anyway to guess that one because we don't have a sophisticated like snap and target data for Hutchinson. I do think Hutchinson has shown to be a bit more like slot dependent, and I don't think Hutchinson ever had sort of the well, also the Higgins's production is just better. Like the value of his production is better, but just in terms of trying to like read like his game on tape, Higgins, he's definitely bigger than Hutchinson, probably by about, I don't know, 2 inches, upwards of 15 pounds. But even so, I think he can kind of create more like initial suddenness and sort of again, not being able to run past the corner. But I think Higgins from that spot is just tough for a corner to defend because with his reach, you sort of you can't like sell out at trying to jam him, or if you do, there's the certain risk of like now there's a 6'4" person who's got to step on you, and even if you kind of catch up, he's still bigger than you. It's the kind of thing where you want to keep that cushion as long as you can, and yet the longer you keep that cushion, the more you open yourself up to that kind of jab look where I think Higgins has just been really consistently productive. So overall, I'm just kind of banking on that Higgins, his per snap target numbers, particularly from the boundary, bode really well for his ability to draw targets from the boundary in the NFL. And, I'm not expecting him to test well insofar, like I'm not expecting a 4.55 or better from Higgins, but as long as he doesn't run like a 4.7 or something worse than a 4.64, I probably wouldn't expect to change his grade a whole lot.
Okay, that's a good like context on him because I think among the sort of upper echelon guys in your rankings, he might be like the least well known like nationally or mainstream wise compared to some of these other guys up there in your top 10. I do want to grab a few just kind of overarching combine storylines as we get ready to have these workouts get rolling. This one less of a fantasy question, but your thoughts on the number one pick, Abdul Carter, or potentially, him having the stress reaction. Would Tennessee's plans change at number one? What would you do if you were the Titans sitting there at one, given the fact that there's probably not going to be a team willing to pay a king's ransom to move up to get someone like a Cam Ward at one this year?
Right. I know it's not what the Titans would want to hear, and it's probably not what they're going to want to do. But I think they should just, if there is an offer to trade down, take it. Like even if it's, I don't know, as long as you're going to get, I don't know, one of like Hunter, Carter, or Graham. Is that the Michigan defensive tackle?
Yes.
One of those guys in a trade down is about the best you can do as the Titans, I think. If you have to stay at the first pick, I'd rather just take the best player, but I think we've all seen by now that it's in most cases it doesn't come down actually to who the best player is for a team in the kind of position that the Titans are. It's like that best non-quarterback needs to be like 1.5 times as good as the best quarterback, or else they take the believed to be best quarterback, which I think in this case is Cam Ward, but I don't know. That's largely based on reports from like, I guess it's already been like 3 weeks or something. Don't want to misquote him, but I think like Pete Thamel might have had something to that effect. I know Deion Sanders alluded to the possibility of Ward being the first player taken. So maybe that doesn't need to be Tennessee, but if I were the Titans, I would want it to be someone other than Tennessee.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I mean, a couple of years ago when Trayvon Walker went first overall, and a lot of that was obviously fueled by what he was able to do at the combine. That was just kind of a funky year where there wasn't the obvious conventional, number one quarterback to be selected. So it's just sort of like, does this person this edge rusher meet that threshold like you were alluding to? Is he like 1.5x what the top QB is?
Tougher to know if he can't do any testing, but it seems like there's no one else that's really pushing him anyway. So it's I don't know. I'm not sure. As much as the stress fracture isn't ideal for Carter, I'm not sure it will change a whole lot. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, it was like, in addition to the shoulder being banged up during the college football playoff, it's like, dang, that's two quick injuries. Like, just kind of getting added to his till at an unfortunate time. But I still, dollars to donuts. I mean, still think he. Mm-hmm.
The key stat for me with Carter, as much as I would have preferred that he had better production in 2023 as well, in 2024, that 23.5 tackles for loss, even in a 16-game season, like that's a pretty unusually high figure. And if you do project even just average athletic testing for Abdul Carter, that kind of production profile does trend, I think, toward the top half of the first round. So if maybe it's generous to do this, but if you do project for Carter above average athletic testing, I think he, along with Hunter, has probably maybe you could argue the tight ends. I'm not sure. But at that point, Carter would have just like a really solid top 10 kind of profile, which in this class might be the best you can do with the first overall pick.
So I'm looking at and you can do this on RotoWire.com, our nifty little first overall pick odds. Would you like Carter at plus 155? He's behind Cam Ward right now.
Yeah, so the way I would do things, I expect will be very different than what the Titans do. Me and the Titans don't really end up on the same page all that often. So
yeah,
I think they're going to take Ward. I'd call it a friggin' slam dunk, actually. I think because I believe it's clearly in the interest of the Titans to trade back and take one of those other players instead of any of these quarterbacks. I think it is an absolute lock that they take one of these quarterbacks, and it's Ward's ahead of Sanders. It doesn't seem like darts closing in on necessarily either of them. It pretty much has to be Ward. It just has to be.
For the odds, I'm a little bit curious about Travis Hunter at plus 850.
I would say that's a better pick. So therefore I can't. I guess I need a trade back to be the explanation for how Hunter goes first if he does.
We cannot have the Titans involved here.
If they're listening, I think they do well to prove me wrong here. But Amy Adams-Strunk, Brian Callahan, Bill Callahan, I don't think you should take Cam Ward first overall.
Callahan Auto Parts. Yes. The list goes on. What did you make of Ashton Jeanty deciding to not do the workout this time around at the combine?
It's not easy. It's not ideal, and it doesn't make things easy for us trying to figure out what kind of player Jeanty is. But I guess it makes enough sense from his perspective for his interest, because I'm not sure what he has to gain really by running now. I think Jeanty will, as long as he runs at some point, he doesn't really lose anything. The Boise State track as a pro day setting is probably a little faster than the combine, and of course teams know that, everybody knows that. But as like the guy written in ink, the running back one in the class, mainly I guess Jeanty just doesn't want to give reason for people to reconsider that, and especially with the additional training time at the Boise State pro day track, as long as he's not pushing 220 or more, I would expect Jeanty to run, I don't know, like low 4.4s there, maybe mid 4.4s at worst.
Do you think that there's this sort of like almost an incentive to not work out if you are kind of considered one of the consensus top guy at your position, like we saw with Marvin Harrison Jr. last year?
Well, some of those cases, they don't take part in the drills because the teams already have pretty reliable, testing data on how they run. And
because the teams tell the players and their agents that they have that, they say like, okay, well, I'm not. Why would I run then? They already told me that they said that this is meets their criteria or whatever. I guess maybe it comes down to, again, like how much you have to gain relative to the field in your class. And if Genty is pretty much locked at running back 1 indefinitely, and unless, I guess it would have to be someone like Omarion Hampton. If Hampton weighs in at 220 and runs a 4.36 or something, maybe then it would be like, oh, now there's actually pressure on Genty to keep his running back 1 spot, and then he has the pro day to catch back up, and he has more time to train specifically for the 40-yard dash and whatever else. I think that is an unlikely scenario. Hampton will probably test quite well, but not well enough to make Genty in serious doubt. And then it makes it, from Genty's perspective, as simple as long as I just check the box at the pro day, I'm holding my position, which is at the lead.
All right. I think that sums it up well when it comes to Genty. Like no real pressure on him at this juncture, but if people do go wild at the combine, then maybe that does build in the lead up to Boise State's pro day. And then lastly of the sort of just big national sports show type of questions, among the quarterbacks, oftentimes there can be and I'm not sure if this class necessarily has it, but there can be a quarterback who does well enough, opens enough eyes at the combine to kind of alter his draft stock in a pretty significant way. I think we saw that with Anthony Richardson a couple of years ago with the show that he put on. Is there anyone among this group of quarterbacks that you could see really turning heads this weekend, or is it just not really there in this class?
I wouldn't exactly call it the expectation that they do well specifically, but as far as guys who could kind of make noise in a setting like this, I think it suits just the toolsiest quarterbacks, the ones who can make ball go far fast. That's kind of what we're here to see, I guess. And as far as doing that while looking like a prototypical quarterback goes, guys like, I think, Will Howard and Quinn Ewers, maybe once they need to do well, this is their one chance to make that kind of noise, but they also might do that. Shadur Sanders is not throwing. I don't know what Ward's situation is, but I feel like Ward is more of like a trick shot passer than he is a conventionally imposing passer. And taller, stronger armed quarterbacks like Howard and Ewers, who I think both of them, in as much as they've had the rough points, they've stood tall in the face of a lot of pressure in their careers and have more or less managed it well. If they flash some zip, getting these quarterback needy teams thinking about like pocket presence, not just in the sense of poise, but like how physically imposing they are in the pocket. Like those are the kind of guys who can maybe fire off like a difficult, high velocity, tight window throw from a difficult platform, while also shaking a pass rusher or two. And I'm not sure the other quarterbacks in this class can really do that at all.
I'm not either. I don't know. I have this sinking feeling or suspicion that with Cam Ward kind of coming in pole position, this does feel like a year where things could really get jumbled after the combine. Like someone, kind of off the radar. You mentioned Howard and Ewers as two potential guys there that, kind of alter the consensus ranking of these guys, right or wrong. I don't think that the combine is the greatest proving ground for these quarterbacks generally to begin with.
And also this, I guess I should say this outcome that I'm talking about as a potential outcome with these quarterbacks, it might not actually be pending the combine. The NFL might just come up with this conclusion on its own as a group of teams. They might already believe it. They might be working their way toward the conclusion. Sometimes these things don't get settled until like right before the draft. But yeah, those are the two guys that I think, especially relative to like the consensus, the public consensus narratives right now, is like Howard and Ewers are the ones that I think can make the most actual noise in this setting in a positive sense.
For whatever reason, I can't shake the possibility of Tyler Shuck maybe
or him too. Yeah, I guess in his case it's just that they look at him and his age and they're like, you just get an MBA or whatever and work for your probably dad or whatever.
No, he can be what we wanted Brandon Whedon to be.
I think that's a pretty fair comparison, and really, like back in the day, I'd be more concerned about Shuck going in whatever the first 40 picks or something. But I think there's just enough like one of the few positives of these so-called analytics syndicates getting their claws around the league is like they would point out correctly, I think, that look, if he's 26, he doesn't actually have developmental upside, and like his production value is trash. Like imagine how bad he would have been playing 5 years ago if he still sucked last year,
Well, yeah, but it just takes one team to be like,
it does. But it takes Tom Telesco got fired, so I'm not sure who would do it now, but
Matthew Stafford's a Raider anyway.
Maybe there lurks a hero who has not revealed himself yet.
We'll see. But yeah, I don't know. Did you see that fight?
Howard Schultz's son fighting Rap Sheet.
Oh gosh, I don't want to say anything that gets us in trouble.
It's like Dan Doherty and the Captain, but in Starbucks, and they're just fancy lads.
For a sec, you said the Captain. I thought of that Philip Seymour Hoffman movie, The Master.
No, not him.
Different film.
The Captain from Deadwood, who does all he choreographs all the like football action scenes you've seen from any movie or TV show. It's a true fact.
Oh, okay.
I was surprised to learn that. That's why he's like a defensive coordinator in Friday Night Lights, because he like orchestrated all those shots.
He's a real one. Before we get on to the next part of the show, we do have a message from our friends over at Pool Genius. Want to win more in your golf, March Madness, and football pools? Pool Genius gives you data-driven picks and strategies to outsmart the competition. With over a decade of analytics and historical data, Pool Genius is the only site dedicated exclusively to helping people win sports pools. With Pool Genius users winning 3 times more often than expected, RotoWire listeners get exclusive offers. Visit poolgenius.com/RotoWire for up to 55% off, or start a 4-day free trial. That's poolgenius.com/RotoWire. Let's see here. Would you like to get into some over-unders on 40-yard dashes that people can put their hard-earned currency on?
Yes.
But these are not our fit. We're not telling you one way or the other. We're just telling you what we would do if posed with these particular propositions.
Don't underestimate the value in having someone to blame, too.
That's true.
Your psyche, at the very least, we can protect your psyche if something goes wrong, as long as you have us to blame.
That's true. I mean, we do it all season long, so why not here with the combine props? All right, I'm gonna say the player, say what it's posted at. We'll say which side we're on and why, and we'll just kind of burn through these.
Okay.
Luther Burden, 441.
I'd rather not touch it, but I would take the is over 442 or slower?
Correct.
Okay, if I had to pick, I would take the over. I would expect something more like low 4.5s, something like that.
We'll say slower or faster for the purposes.
Slower.
I think slower as well. Omarion Hampton, running back out of North Carolina, 446.
Oh, that's stingy. I I'm gonna
I think
take
that's right on. I'm leaving it be.
Yeah, I don't want to touch that one either, but I'm taking slower because 4.45 would, not that he can't do it, but 4.45 would put Hampton in a pretty unique category, especially if he weighs in at 220 or more.
Yeah, so that's going to be tricky to get to. Quinshawn Judkins out of Ohio State, 4.49, slower or faster?
I'd say slower, and if it is slower, I do not become at all concerned for Judkins. I'd still be a big fan, especially if he's over like 215 when he runs it.
I saw this posted at 4.51 yesterday. So
I'd be less likely to take the slower on that one, but I just think if Judkins does log a sub 4.5, then I feel like everyone should stop giving him such a hard time. Yeah, just say like, oh yeah, you're really good. I remember now.
People have been kind of bending over backwards to find ways to.
They've been bored. It happens. It's like, oh right, this guy that we all thought would be like a top 15 pick at running back 2 years ago sucks now
because of this one clip against Notre Dame, right?
Yeah,
he got caught by a guy. Unbelievable. Let's see. This one, I don't really like remember him being like this complete burner, so I'm a little bit on this one. Isaiah Bond out of Texas by way of Alabama, 4.32.
He is a former track guy, and his 100-meter times were pretty similar to Xavier Worthy's, but I think first of all, I think Bond is heavier enough, heavier than Worthy, and just maybe also heavier than he was when he logged those 100-meter times in high school. I would expect Bond to be more like 4.35 than 4.32, but there's still a lot of danger in taking the over with that, I think, because especially if so I'm imagining Bond as being like 190 pounds or something. If he comes to the combine at 177, then I'm going to be like, oh crap, he's going to run like a 4.26 now.
Okay, all right. So he's maybe someone to wait until the weight is in on. A couple more interesting guys before we move elsewhere. Cam Scatterbo at a 4.55. Where are you with that?
I'd take the slower, and if you think Scatterbo so much as runs a 4.59, I think you can all but lock him into the second round. I think he's more so in danger of running like a 4.66.
I tend to agree. I've put him at slower on most of my tickets thus far. And then let's go Arian Smith, the Georgia Bulldog.
I'm glad you mentioned him because I think he will probably, granted, I haven't looked at all the defensive players. I know that there's that Iowa State corner who's also going to log one of the fastest 40 times, might have the fastest at the combine. But with Arian Smith, I think based on his high school 100-meter times, you have to wonder if he's going to put heat on that Xavier Worthy 40 time. I think you can take it as a pretty much lock that Arian Smith runs under a 4.3.
I like it. Do you have any like anecdotes or like
it's just
for that beyond the track times?
Not really. It's just so they do have these kind of sketchy websites that seem to aggregate high school 100-meter times, and there's always a range, or usually anyway there's a range with these guys, and maybe some of it has to do with like how the specific age they were at the time, or the specific weight they were at the time, or even like the venue or whether there was wind present or something like that. But you can find some 100-meter times for Arian Smith, and I imagine these have to be somewhat official, or else I don't know where these sketchy sites, I don't know where they'd be drawing the numbers from, unless they were sort of like hassling some, poor Georgia high school or school district or something or other person to get these numbers confirmed. But you find multiple 10.1 sub 10.2 100-meter times for Arian Smith, and that's pushing like Tyreek Hill territory.
He was unbelievably fast during his time at Georgia. Very akin to I remember it's different category, obviously, but like I remember when Odell would get a little bit dinged up in the NFL, and people would liken it to a sports car with the alignment being slightly off, and he just wouldn't be the same guy. Like Aaron Smith, oftentimes, like he missed a good amount of time during his time at Georgia, but when he was healthy, which again wasn't super often until this past year, there would always be like one or two like tantalizing plays per season where it's like that speed is like there's nobody around.
The defense
him
still has to
those
run with
touchdowns.
him. I don't think I think it's pretty unlikely that Smith ever is a starter or anything like that. But if you have a role, especially if you can play gunner on special teams, I don't know if he can. Maybe he's soft. I don't know. But particularly if Smith can play gunner on special teams, if he can just give you like 250 snaps on offense, is giving you clearing routes, just making the safety run with you, like that's still a player that I could keep a roster spot for.
Yeah, I mean that's speed that you certainly cannot teach. That'll do it for our 40 time over or more or less type of picks. As we round it out, any guys that you wanted to discuss that maybe we haven't yet, or any guys that are being kind of propped up in more of the mainstream draft Twitter that you could see maybe falling a little bit coming out of this weekend?
Real quickly got to issue a retraction. I said last week that I thought McKechnie Jackson from Arkansas might have one of the fastest 40 times among running backs. That's he should test fine. He should be pretty athletic or whatever. But I got burned by I really wish I could say words that I can't right now. Google's really helpful AI assistant or whatever that is. When you search for things, you thought like a search engine was supposed to be a thing that you put a query into and it brings back things that match the query. It doesn't do that anymore. I guess you put it, you ask it to give you this thing, and it gives you something. It gives you whatever it feels like back. And it was telling me, it gave me this image that said like, this is a verbatim quote, like almost like a picture looking kind of thing from the Arkansas profile of McKechnie Jackson, saying that he ran a 10-1 100-meter dash. That never happened. If I remember right, he ran more like an 11.5. So,
oh dear.
Yeah, I love the AI revolution is really good.
Dude, it's so good.
Everyone who pushes it on you clearly is smart. But anyway, I'm the dumb one. McKechnie Jackson won't run that fast. However, Jaden Blue and Dylan Sampson both will. So those were the other two that we mentioned as the fastest running back 40s, and those guys are definitely going, I think, sub 4.4. I guess off the top of my head, otherwise, as far as like players that are getting some hype that I don't really see it for, and I can't tell how much of this is hype and how much of this is like just draft Twitter. And draft Twitter goes weird places. You can't like look at draft Twitter and say like, oh, this is people are doing this. It's like they're not really people. They're like, it's a weird insulated group of people who have this kind of internet-based cabin fever, and they just kind of get wacky sometimes. But the Tez Johnson, Oregon, Bo Nix's adopted brother, Troy transfer. He was a good college receiver, no doubt, maybe even a great college receiver, and he may well have some role in the NFL. I don't know. But at 5'9", 157, I think it was definitely sub 160. Johnson played primarily, almost entirely from the slot at Oregon. At 160 or less, you're not playing the slot anymore. That used to be the way teams handled it. They're like, oh, you're small, you're a tiny receiver, you go into the slot. Now they want someone who can block from the slot, and they're putting the tiny receivers on the boundary. Houston, right. They're putting Tank Dell on the boundary. Tez Johnson has never produced from the boundary because he's never played there. And if we don't even know for sure that he can produce as a route runner from the boundary, and if we know he's too small to play the slot, I literally don't see how he gets on the field. So I think if you're looking for a tiny receiver in this draft for a sleeper candidate, it's not Tez Johnson. I think Jacoby George from Miami makes a lot more sense.
And why is that exactly?
Well, he's still kind of too small, but he's Jacoby George is like 169 or something like that. Whereas again, Tez Johnson was like 156, 157. Jacoby George seemed to get rotated out for Miami a lot. Like they would put in whoever that there's like Houston transfer or something like that, and They, of course, had Xavier Restrepo in the slot most of the time. So Jacoby George was kind of like
why not Restrepo?
Yeah, Restrepo is interesting. It's just like he can only play the slot. Whereas I think Jacoby and Restrepo is pretty stocky. He's like pushing 200 pounds at 5'9",
right.
Whereas Jacoby George is a little bit more like Tez Johnson, where it's like, valid criticism. He's pretty much too skinny. But even if he's like a 3 wide specialist, I think Jacoby George's target numbers per snap and then his per target returns indicate that he can likely help a team on something like 600, 700 snaps, especially if they run 3 wide a lot and are like pass happy.
All right. I think that I love getting kind of a dark horse type of guy, get that name out there before.
He's probably just like the Amir Smith-Marset of this draft, but sometimes those guys are just sane enough that they work out in the end. I think Amir Smith-Marset was a little wacky, and Jacoby George, I guess, is like a hothead too. But you just don't find that many receivers who get that many targets and give those returns from the boundary as he did.
You don't. So keep an eye on him. But I'm excited for this weekend. This is always one of my favorite weekends of
Hopefully
the year.
Someone runs. Hopefully we see a 40-yard dash.
Yeah. Because too many guys are what are you too good to run for 40 yards? Give me a break.
Got to do it on a blue field.
Yeah, come on now. So I'm excited for that. I believe that the skill position guys will go on Saturday, but guys are already running as we record this here podcast. My guy Tyrion Ingram's Dawkins from Georgia, 4.86 in the 40. Love to see that, but
what is that, like a 380 guy?
He's big. He's a big fella, defensive tackle. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for us here on this edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. We'll be back next week. We'll do kind of an emergency, instant reaction type of podcast early next week, and I believe the rest of our lineup of off-season pods will get rolling next week as well. So you can look forward to having more than just us every single day of the week. So get ready for that. But for Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening.